Chivalry 2 is a multiplayer first and third person slasher inspired by epic medieval movie battles. Players are thrust into the action of every iconic moment of the era, from clashing swords to storming flaming arrows to sprawling castle sieges and more. Rise to glory and expand your arsenal with new subclass systems that provide more variety than ever before. 4 base classes expanded to 12 subclasses and over 30 unique weapons, each with multiple visual variants. New support items ranging from oil pots to barricades, supply crates, and archer stakes add even more tactical options to the battlefield. Charge into battle alongside your friends with all platform crossplay and claim glory by your blade. Chivalry 2 is unique in that it doesn't prey upon the usual lure of FOMO or other monetization. There's no battle pass, nothing to gamble on, and no unlockables that are hidden behind a paywall. Instead of using these tactics, Chivalry 2 stands on its own 2 feet by getting the player into the thick of the battle very quickly. Welcome to the channel, I'm Lord Glarp and this is First Impressions, a series where I test out games for 10 hours or so and report back with observations that will hopefully help others make good use of their time and money. Chapters can be found in the description and the video timeline for your viewing convenience. Today I'm covering Chivalry 2, which released back in June 8th of 2021 on the Epic Store, consoles, and more recently released on Steam. A friend picked up the game for me, so I figured why not try it out and make a first impressions while I'm at it. The moment you boot up the game for the first time, you're thrust into a solo tutorial against the backdrop of some kind of tournament ground. The voice acting is both well-defined, immersive, and absolutely hilarious.
And it's easy to land. Overhead deal great damage, but are harder to land.
In the training grounds, first I'm taught how to swing a sword, and it's surprisingly complicated without being outright overwhelming.
Range. Well, you're sharper than wood, I'll give you that. Now, chain your attacks in a combo to overwhelm your opponent.
Left click does a normal side-to-side swing, mouse wheel up does an overhead swing, and mouse wheel down does a thrust. The weapon will deal damage to whatever the weapon model hits, not just where you're pointing. This means that you can swing in a wider arc by twisting your character around during the attack. I like this so far. It seems pretty intuitive after a couple dozen swings, and we'll see where we go from here.
Remember, try to kill them with your weapon, not your eyes.
Continuing onward, we learn how to kick, dodge, and block, essential for staying alive on a medieval battlefield. During this portion of training, I learn about counters and riposte. These require you to attack during a block and to use the same directional attack as your... Yeah, this is where combat gets a little too much for me. Maybe I'll get the hang of it, but something tells me that with my mid-30s brain and the chaos of war, I'm probably not going to be analyzing the attack patterns of my foes as much as I'm going to be running for my life. Health recovers over time. You can instantly be healed by allies and can apply a bandage to heal yourself. If you're downed but not dead, a friendly can pick you up with relative ease. There's also a stamina gauge, but I kind of forget that it exists most of the time as it almost never runs out or is ever relevant to me. At the end of the tutorial, we're given the opportunity to try out what we've learned against a couple bots, and I'm starting to fall in love with the throwing weapon mechanic.
First conscript not to die today.
Once the tutorial concludes, I'm immediately sent to my first real fight. It's a rainy battlefield, and not only am I surrounded by allies, but I can actually see my enemies gathering just a few yards away. The scene is actually pretty tense, made even more epic as another player paces in front of our team, giving a moving speech about legacy and glory before leading the charge.
Eliminate the enemy team!
That's enough!
The main menu is pretty straightforward. Here you can track your account and individual class levels. There's also a ton of customization options for each class and weapon variants for each subclass. None of the customizations seem particularly cartoonish or otherwise break the aesthetic of the game, and I really appreciate this.
Your eyes deceive you not. I am here in the flesh.
I decided to try out a big 64-player game, and after waiting only a few short seconds, I'm thrust into a pretty chaotic mess. Our objective is to push a convoy forward. This is a lot like classic payload delivery missions. At first, this seems a bit lame, as it's something I feel as though I've done 100 other times in 100 different games.
Thanks for the assist.
Once the convoy has reached its destination, our objective changed to capture a gatehouse, and I tried to get a ladder in place to capture the outer wall. Chivalry 2 often gives attacking teams multiple ways to complete objectives, along with things like ballistas and environmental traps to keep combat spicy.
We've nearly taken the gatehouse! Good! The gatehouse now belongs to the base in order!
Capturing the gatehouse allows us to keep the convoy moving. This is the third step in our mission, and the battle is starting to feel like a build-up to something bigger. I will say that every so often it feels like hits aren't registering correctly. This mainly happens with charge attacks and when loads of players are all blocking and swinging like crazy. Also, the placeable defenses don't seem to be super useful, and I'd like to see them expanded upon.
This is...
After pushing through several gatehouses and a flammable barricade, we made it to our final destination, a castle at the side of a huge field. This was starting to feel like a proper siege and a proper war. We fixed up a catapult and I started launching boulders and soldiers at the enemy's walls.
Guard the siege equipment!
Eventually, we took down the outer wall and stormed the castle with our final objective to slay the Duke.
This is not good.
The battle was long and perilous, but in the end we could not claim victory. However, this was one of the best losing experiences I've had in a game in a long ass time. Win or lose, the game is so exciting and well paced that I was having a blast either way. Over the next several games, I experimented with different classes and tried out different mechanics such as throwing everything in sight, trying to survive with a ballista bolt as a main weapon, and throwing chickens and mounted combat. Each of these mechanics were satisfying to varying degrees, and in most cases, it just feels good that they exist at all.
Bugger all.
Now, I'm actually impressed.
Thank goodness you were here.
Killing a foe by tossing a barrel at their head or stabbing them with artillery ammo just feels so damn good. The combat is slow enough to not feel super overwhelming, but fast enough that you have to keep thinking on your feet. One of the worst experiences I had while playing was archery. Not only was I a bad shot to begin with, but it felt like arrows would disappear over distances, and it didn't make sense, and some impressive shots were treated as misses. As you can see from the video, the pole hammer quickly became my favorite weapon, as the blunt impacts look and felt super satisfying when they connected. Alright, let's get to some pros and cons and final thoughts about Chivalry 2. Objectives tell a compact story and are varied in design, and I just really like the way that the different objectives kind of lead you forward through this almost environmental storytelling. The game is super immersive with awesome sounds, really compelling environments, props everywhere, and aesthetics galore. Combat is pretty complex and offers many different approaches to different encounters and different situations. You can also change your class on the fly between deaths, and I really like that. Probably my favorite pro about the game is you buy the game, you play the game, there's no FOMO, there's no bullshit. And in today's day and age, that is really hard to find.
Not good!
So here are some cons. Some attacks don't register correctly and can put a damper on an otherwise epic moment. The subclasses are lacking in utility and could be a little bit more interesting. Some of the subclasses just kind of feel too similar to the main class, and the utilities I almost forget even exist. Some objectives need balancing and possibly spawn point rework, as enemies will spawn on top of you or you'll spawn on top of a point. Sometimes it just feels like the balance isn't correct on how long it takes you to either get to an objective to attack or how long it takes you to get to an objective to defend. At its best and most immersive, Chivalry 2 is two teams of 32 players participating in deep and immersive combat with an incredibly high skill ceiling filled to the brim with emergent strategy. Words of aggressive faction loyalty fill the chat, and the clash of steel and screams of soldiers fighting for their lives fill your ears. At its most degenerate, Chivalry 2 is two teams of 32 Glenn Quagmire sound-alikes screaming at the top of their lungs as they beat the opposite team to death with projectile pigs and beehives, while the chat is filled with heated debate over which Tony Hawk Pro Skater game is the greatest and most memorable. Most of this while completely ignoring the objective, and honestly, I'm here for both of them. As someone who typically doesn't enjoy these kind of mass melee battle PvP games, Chivalry 2 has its hooks in me, and I'm definitely going to be playing it into the foreseeable future. But what do you think? Are you playing Chivalry 2 currently? Do you plan on giving it a try? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and until the next one, have a good one.
I am not open to suggestions.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great!
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good,
It
though.
could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey!